So we're diving into the story of Lily Phillips, this OnlyFans model who, I mean, she's all over the headlines, right? Wanting to be with 1,000 men in one day.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely attention grabbing. And, you really do have to wonder what's going on beneath the surface. We've got articles and social media posts, and even a YouTuber made a documentary about her. So it feels like we're piecing together this puzzle, not just about Lily, but about like the whole world of adult entertainment and what it means to be famous online nowadays.
Okay, so, I mean, before we even get into the why of it all, can we just rewind? Like, where did Lily even come from before she became this, headline?
Well, she actually started out in fashion. She was building a following as a fashion influencer on Instagram. So it does make you wonder what made her switch to OnlyFans.
Was it just the money? Because some sources say she's making millions from her content now.
I mean, money's definitely a factor in this industry, but I think there's got to be more to it than that. Remember, she even tried to join OnlyFans when she was only 17. She even tried using her provisional ID, but it didn't work.
Wow, yeah, that does suggest like an early ambition to be part of this world.
Exactly. So, like, while the money is obviously there, it seems like something else is going on, too. Like this desire for recognition, maybe assassination with pushing boundaries. It's probably a pretty complex mix of motivations, honestly.
Yeah, and that brings us to, I guess, what the media is calling those sex stunts. That event with the 101 men in the Airbnb in London.
Oh, yeah, the Airbnb incident. This is where things get kind of messy in more ways than one. I mean, not only did it possibly get her banned from Airbnb because she didn't have the owner's consent.
Oh, I bet Airbnb was not happy about
No,
that.
not at all. But it seems like it really affected Lily, too. Like in the documentary, you can see her crying and talking about feeling pressured and even like dissociating during those 14 hours.
Man, 14 hours, that's intense. It makes you wonder why someone would want to push even further after going through something like that. But she even talked about training for events with 300 men and then ultimately that, almost mythical goal of 1,000.
It's almost like an athlete pushing themselves to hit a new record. But the stakes are so much higher here, obviously, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. And Lily insists it's not all about the money, even though, she's clearly making a lot of it. She keeps saying she loves the game and wants to be unique and legend. Do you think she's being genuine when she says that? Or is there something else going on?
It's tough to say for sure. On the one hand, she could just be, marketing herself, creating this narrative that makes her stand out in a very crowded online space.
Especially with someone like Sophie Rain reportedly making over $43 million a year on OnlyFans. You have to do something pretty crazy to even get noticed, I guess.
Exactly. But then again, she seemed really vulnerable after that 101-man event. So maybe it's not just some calculated career move. Maybe she's a thrill seeker. Maybe it's about testing her own boundaries and seeing what's even possible.
So I guess if we can look past the shock value, past those crazy headlines, what can we actually learn from all this?
Well, I think her story gives us this glimpse into how adult entertainment works in the digital age, like how intense the competition is and the pressure to constantly push those boundaries. And of course, the risks, the physical and emotional risks.
It definitely brings up some ethical questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this self-exploitation or is it like empowered entrepreneurship? Where do we even draw the line?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? And there really aren't any easy answers. Some people could say she's in control, making her own choices and, getting the money. She did say no amount of money would make her stop.
But then others might see it as like a cry for help, a need for attention that could really hurt her in the long run.
That's definitely a concern. It is interesting that she's pretty open about, not being a role model. She even says she doesn't know what self-respect is. It's almost like she's, defending herself before anyone can even criticize her.
Yeah, it's like she knows people will judge, but she's also like rejecting those ideas of what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole thing with U.S. immigration when they questioned her about prostitution.
Oh, right. That adds another layer to all of this. It brings up legal questions, right? About what kind of work she's actually doing. That line between adult entertainment and sex work, she was very clear that it wasn't prostitution because, the men don't pay her directly.
Which, technically might be true, but it just shows how blurry the lines are in this whole industry and how law enforcement sees it.
Absolutely. It makes you think about how content creators could be taken advantage of when they're, pushing these limits. And speaking of pushing limits, we didn't even mention her goal of breaking the world record. She says she and her assistant came up with the idea together.
Wait, she has like an assistant?
Yeah.
Just for this?
It's kind of funny, but also, I don't know, a little scary. It just shows how organized these, I guess, stunts are.
Yeah.
Like a whole production team behind it all. Which then makes me wonder, is this all just for show? Or is she really trying to break this record?
That's a question only she can answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth thinking about how, especially these days, wanting to be famous and recognized can really change how we see ourselves and the world.
Yeah, it's like a cycle.
Hmm.
The more shocking it is, the more attention it gets, the more pressure there is to keep doing even crazier stuff. And all that, it's easy to forget about the human cost. This whole thing with Lily really makes you think about OnlyFans as a whole, you know? It's not just individuals doing their own thing anymore. It's like a huge industry with its own rules and power dynamics and everything.
Exactly. And in that kind of system, there's constant pressure to be new and different, to stand out, especially when viewers are seeing so much content all the time. Which actually reminds me, Lily said she was doing similar stuff before OnlyFans, just as a hobby. Do you think she's saying that to make it seem normal? Or was it really something she was already into?
It's really hard to know without knowing her better. But it does make you think about how technology is used to like amplify and make money off of personal experiences.
So I guess, what does it all mean? What have we learned from Lily's story?
I think it forces us to, face some uncomfortable truths about what fame really is and, how sex is used to sell things and the ethics of it all, especially online. We've got her ambition and the money and the potential risks and those ethical gray areas.
And where do we, as a society, decide what's okay to share publicly and what should stay private?
Yeah.
What about how this affects Lily herself? We talked about the emotional toll and the possible legal trouble, but what about her personal life, her relationships in the long run?
That's a really important point, and honestly one that gets ignored a lot when these stories blow up. Like, what happens when the cameras go away? How does someone who's basically built their career on putting everything out there have normal relationships? Be intimate with someone. It's like she's created this persona, this character that might be hard to separate from who she actually is. And that can really mess with someone's head.
Yeah, it's like she's constantly being watched. Every little thing she does gets blown up and talked about by everyone. Does that even allow you to be yourself, to have real connections with people?
It's a good question. I mean, when your whole life becomes something people buy and sell, when being intimate with someone becomes content, it's got to be hard to know what's real anymore.
It makes you think about how this will affect her relationships down the road. Like, can she even trust anyone? Let herself be vulnerable.
Right, exactly. It's easy to forget that behind all the headlines and that perfect image she puts online, she's just a normal person trying to figure things out like everyone else.
What about her future? I mean, this kind of fame, especially with what she does, it doesn't usually last, right? What happens when people stop paying attention? When the next big thing comes along?
Yeah, that's the tough part about this industry. You're always having to hustle to stay relevant, to keep doing crazier and crazier stuff to get those views. It's got to be exhausting.
Makes you wonder if she's even thought about what she'll do next. Like, what happens when the spotlight's gone?
Maybe she has. Or maybe she's so caught up in everything right now that she can't even think about it. It's a risky game she's playing, and who knows how long she can keep it up.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, I just keep feeling kind of uneasy about it all. I mean, her story is definitely fascinating and shocking, but it's kind of sad, too. It's like a warning about how fame can be both amazing and dangerous these days, especially online.
I agree. It reminds us that wanting attention and validation so badly and constantly trying to push the limits can really cost you. Her story brings up way more questions than it answers, and I think that's what's so unsettling about it.
So where do we go from here? What can we even learn from all this?
Well, I think it should make us think more critically about all the stuff we see online. To remember that there are real people behind those perfect online personas, people with real feelings and struggles. We should try to have some empathy and think about how society plays a role in the choices people make.
And maybe most importantly, to think about how we see fame and attention. What are we really looking for when we click on these stories, when we watch this content? What does that say about us? Those are some good questions to think about as we try to make sense of the digital world.